But race politics, it seems to kill honesty and accountability. The New South Wales government has now totaled up everything it spends on programs just for Aborigines, on top of the usual welfare and health and schooling support that everyone gets. The total bill, and this excludes federal program funding, is $1.1 billion a year, which means that with about 270,000 Aborigines in New South Wales, it works out to just over $4,000 for every man, woman and child. Joining me is Warren Mundine, former federal president of the Labor Party, former Liberal candidate and an advisor on Indigenous affairs to two Prime Ministers. Warren Mundine, it's great to see you again, mate. Now, I would not resent a single cent of that money. I wouldn't quibble over a dollar if I thought it really did help Aborigines get into work, do well at school and get healthier with more children safe at home, given the level of disadvantage we see with so many. But for all that money, Warren, I am not sure I am seeing the results. And I've got to ask, are you?
Well, that's true. When I was chair of the Prime Minister's Indigenous Advisory Council, we pushed for this to happen, that we need to have a look at what is actually being spent, and then we can compare it to what are the outcomes of that expenditure. And then we can actually then start rejigging things and making things be more focused on the outcomes and delivering of those outcomes in a timely fashion. So this, look, I'm glad that it's a bit late. It's taken a few years, but I'm glad they're finally starting to do that. They're looking at these figures. They're saying, okay, this is what we spend, and this is what we spend on health, this is what we spend on education, and so on. Are we achieving the outcomes that we have set the goals for that? And that's the big question now.
Warren, yeah, I've been thinking about this kind of stuff ever since there was an inquiry led by Jim Berg. I don't know whether you know him, an Aboriginal leader in Victoria some time ago in Stolen Generations Victoria. They couldn't find a single truly stolen Aboriginal by their definition, but they could find 36 different organisations handing out welfare to Stolen Generations victims, which I found an extraordinary disparity. And I've just got to ask, why is it that accountability has been so lacking in this sector? You've seen some of the reports from some of the communities in South Australia lately, no doubt. Are we too frightened to grasp this issue?
Well, that seems to be the position we've put ourselves in that as soon as they do something and try and make it get the outcomes that we desire to have, getting people into work, getting them educated, running their own businesses and healthy and so on, you get abused and called racist, and I get called the old line of Uncle Tom. But we can't go on doing these things. We have to have these reports actually spelling out where the dollars are being spent, and then we can look at whether people are doing their job or achieving what they're supposed to be doing. And that's where this is where we're starting to head into this accountability stage. When people are saying, oh, we need to do this and need to do that, well, is that the right thing to do? How much money have we spent on this, and how come we still got problems?
Can I ask you though, Warren, like I say, if someone said to me, if you double the money, we would end some of the disparities we see in the, closing the gap reports, education, welfare, child outcomes, all that kind of stuff, health outcomes. I would sign, I'd say, where can I sign? But then I still ask this, should we actually have Aboriginal-only programs?
Look, I know you're right, and you're focusing on the true area here. The area that we need to do, we do need to have some Aboriginal focused programs, because we know that's where the problems are arising. But the way it's put in place, this is the problem. The way we've seen some of these reports going out for ages now, where all this money's being spent, and we haven't seen the closing the gap really changing it at all. So we've got to really start doing it region by region, because we know there is a gap between Aboriginals living in the city and Aboriginals living in the bush and remote areas. So we need to actually start looking at that from a regional approach and saying, okay, people out of Bourke need this sort of help and need this sort of thing. We'll give you this amount of money, but yous have got to deliver on this. And if you don't deliver, then we'll have to do it a different way.
Warren Mundine, I know you've been actually pushing that accountability cause for a long time. You've taken some hits personally for it, the abuse you mentioned before, but I admire your courage and thank you so much for talking to me.